The dust swirled around Lucinda Lambert as she crumpled to her knees, her parched lips cracking as she gasped for breath in the merciless heat of the Kansas plains. The year was 1872, and she had been abandoned here to die, left behind by the wagon train after her husband's sudden death had made her an inconvenience to the others pushing westward. 3 days she had wandered, her water canteen now empty, her small bundle of possessions growing heavier with each stumbling step. The gingham dress that had once fit her slender frame now hung loose, a testament to the meals she'd missed since being forced to fend for herself. At 23, Lucinda had never imagined she'd face death alone in this vast emptiness. She squinted at the horizon, wondering if the dark shape moving toward her was real or just another mirage conjured by her desperate mind. The shape grew larger, taking the form of a man on horseback. Lucinda tried to call out, but her throat produced only a raspy whisper. She waved weakly, praying he would see her. The rider approached steadily, his dark hat shielding his face from the punishing sun. He pulled his horse to a stop several yards away, studying her with cautious eyes. "Madam, you all right?" His voice carried across the distance between them. "Water," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing broad shoulders and a lean frame. He approached slowly, as if worried she might bolt like a frightened animal. When he reached her side, Lucinda could see his face clearly weathered by sun and wind, but handsome, with kind eyes that reminded her of the clear blue Kansas sky. "Name's Lucas O'Malley," he said, reaching for a canteen at his hip. "Drink slow now." Lucinda took the canteen with trembling hands, forcing herself to sip rather than gulp the precious liquid. It tasted better than anything she'd ever had before. "Lucinda Lambert," she replied after moistening her throat. "They left me behind." Lucas nodded grimly, understanding immediately. It wasn't uncommon for wagon trains to abandon those who couldn't keep up, especially women traveling alone. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. "Here," he said, breaking off a piece and offering it to her. "You'll feast with me today, Miss Lambert. Can't have you starving out here on these plains." The simple words, spoken with such casual kindness, brought tears to Lucinda's eyes. She accepted the bread, taking a small bite. The flavor exploded in her mouth, yeasty, slightly sweet, and undeniably fresh. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die out here." "Not while I'm around," Lucas replied, his voice firm with conviction. "My ranch is about half a day's ride from here. You're welcome to rest there until you decide what's next for you." Lucinda hesitated. She knew nothing about this man except his name and the kindness he'd shown her. But what choice did she have? Stay here and certainly perish, or trust this stranger and possibly live? "I accept your offer, Mr. O'Malley." Lucas nodded, satisfied. "Can you ride?" "Yes, my father taught me." He helped her to her feet, his strong hands gentle on her arms. Lucinda swayed slightly, and he steadied her. "Easy now. We'll take it slow." Lucas led her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently waiting. He helped her mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. Lucinda felt odd being so close to a stranger, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her back, but there was something reassuring about his presence. "Hold on," he instructed, and she gripped the saddle horn as he urged the horse forward. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling Lucinda into a strange calm. She had lost everything her husband of barely a year, her hopes for a new life in California, even her modest possessions when the wagon master had forced her to leave most behind. "How did you come to be alone out here?" Lucas finally asked, his voice close to her ear. Lucinda sighed. "My husband, Thomas, died of fever 2 weeks ago. The wagon train couldn't afford to slow down for a widow with no man to drive her wagon. The wagon master said I could stay with them if I'd marry him, but she paused, the memory still raw. "I refused. So they left me with a day's water and food and wished me luck finding a settlement." Lucas's arm tightened briefly around her waist, a gesture of protection that surprised her. "Some men have no honor," he said quietly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Lambert." "Please, call me Lucinda," she replied. "Mrs. Lambert died out there on the plains, I think." The sun was beginning to set when they crested a small hill, and Lucinda gasped at what she saw. Below them, nestled in a gentle valley with a creek running through it, was a small but prosperous-looking ranch. A sturdy log house stood at its center, with a barn and several corrals nearby. Cattle grazed in the distance, and smoke rose invitingly from the house's chimney. "Welcome to Whispering Creek Ranch," Lucas said, pride evident in his voice. "It's not much, but it's home." "It's beautiful," Lucinda breathed, meaning it. After days of endless, empty prairie, the ranch looked like paradise. As they approached, a middle-aged woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She watched their approach with undisguised curiosity. "That's Martha," Lucas explained. "My housekeeper and cook. Been with me since I started this place 5 years ago." Martha met them at the hitching post, her eyes widening as she took in Lucinda's disheveled appearance. "Lord have mercy, Lucas, what have you brought home now?" she asked, though her tone was kind rather than accusatory. "Martha, this is Miss Lucinda Lambert. I found her abandoned on the plains. She'll be staying with us for a while." Martha clicked her tongue in sympathy. "You poor dear. Come inside, and we'll get you cleaned up. There's stew on the stove and hot water for a bath." The mention of a bath nearly undid Lucinda's composure. She slid from the horse with Lucas's help, her legs wobbly beneath her. "Thank you," she said, looking between Lucas and Martha. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "No need for that talk," Martha said firmly, taking Lucinda's arm. "Come along now." Lucinda glanced back at Lucas, who tipped his hat to her with a small smile. "Go on. Get yourself settled. We can talk more at supper." The next hour was a blur of luxury for Lucinda. Martha drew her a bath in a private room off the kitchen, provided clean clothes that had belonged to Lucas's sister, and left her to soak away the grime and despair of the past days. The water turned gray with dust, but Lucinda emerged feeling reborn. The borrowed dress was a simple blue calico that fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose around her waist. Martha had provided a brush as well, and Lucinda worked through the tangles in her long brown hair until it shone again. When she entered the kitchen, Lucas was already seated at the table. He stood when she appeared, his eyes widening slightly. "Miss Lambert," he said, his voice strangely formal. "You look restored." Martha bustled around them, setting bowls of fragrant stew on the table along with a fresh loaf of bread similar to what Lucas had shared with her on the plains. Sit, she urged. "Both of you. This girl needs feeding up, Lucas. Nothing but skin and bones." They ate in relative silence at first, Lucinda savoring each spoonful of the rich stew. It contained beef, potatoes, and carrots in a thick gravy that tasted of home and safety. The bread was just as delicious as she remembered, especially when slathered with fresh butter. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "I haven't had a proper meal in weeks." "Martha's the best cook in 3 counties, Lucas replied. "One of the reasons I keep her around despite her bossing." Martha snorted as she refilled their coffee cups. "As if you could manage without me, Lucas O'Malley. You'd be eating beans from a can every night." Their easy banter made Lucinda smile. There was obvious affection between them, a comfortable relationship built on mutual respect. "Now," Martha said, turning to Lucinda, "Lucas tells me you were with a wagon train headed to California?" Lucinda nodded, setting down her spoon. "My husband had dreams of starting a vineyard there. He'd read about the climate being perfect for grapes." She swallowed hard. "Now I don't know what I'll do or where I'll go." "You'll stay here until you're well enough to decide," Lucas said firmly. "No need to rush." "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," he interrupted. "This house has plenty of room, and it's not safe for a woman to travel alone in these parts." Lucinda looked down at her bowl, fighting back tears. "You're very kind, Mr. O'Malley." "Lucas," he corrected gently. "And it's not kindness. It's common decency." After supper, Martha showed Lucinda to a small but comfortable bedroom on the 2nd floor. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath a window that overlooked the creek. "This was Amanda's room, Lucas's sister," Martha explained. "She's married now and living in Denver with her husband." "It's lovely," Lucinda said, running her hand over the patchwork quilt that covered the bed. Martha hesitated in the doorway. "Lucas is a good man, Miss Lambert. One of the best I know. He wouldn't have left anyone out there to die, but I've never seen him bring someone home before." Lucinda wasn't sure how to respond to that. I'm very grateful to him. As you should be. Rest now. Morning comes early on a ranch. Left alone, Lucinda sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. This morning, she had been preparing to die. Tonight, she was clean, fed, and safe in a stranger's home. She said a quiet prayer of thanks before sliding beneath the quilt and falling into the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. The next morning, Lucinda woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sounds of a working ranch. For a moment, she was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She dressed quickly in the same borrowed dress and made her way downstairs. Martha was in the kitchen, rolling out dough for biscuits. Good morning, dear. Sleep well. Better than I have in a long time, Lucinda admitted. Can I help with anything? Martha looked pleased at the offer. You can set the table if you like. Lucas will be in soon. He's been up since before dawn, checking on a new calf. Lucinda found plates and silverware where Martha directed and set the table for three. She was just pouring coffee when Lucas entered, bringing with him the scent of fresh air and horses. Morning, he greeted, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. How did you sleep, Miss Lambert? Wonderfully, thank you. And please, call me Lucinda. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Lucinda it is, then. Over breakfast, Lucas explained more about his ranch. He had come west after the war, using his savings to purchase land and slowly building his herd. Now he had one of the most successful cattle operations in the county, with plans to expand further. It sounds like you've built something remarkable, Lucinda said, impressed by his accomplishments. It's been hard work, he acknowledged, but worth it. What about you? Before the wagon train, where did you call home? Missouri, she replied. My father was a schoolteacher in a small town near Springfield. After he passed 2 years ago, there wasn't much keeping me there. When Thomas proposed and talked about California, it seemed like an adventure. Lucas's expression softened. I'm sorry about your father. And your husband? Lucinda nodded, looking down at her plate. Thank you. It's been a difficult time. After breakfast, Lucas invited Lucinda to join him for a tour of the ranch. Martha provided her with a shawl against the morning chill, and they set out on foot. The ranch was even more impressive in daylight. The barn was large and well-maintained, housing several horses in individual stalls. Lucas introduced her to his favorite, the chestnut stallion named Thunder, who had carried them both the previous day. He's beautiful, Lucinda said, stroking the horse's velvety nose. And he knows it, Lucas replied with a chuckle. Most vain animal I've ever owned. They walked to the corrals where several cowboys were working with young cattle. Lucas greeted each man by name, introducing Lucinda simply as Miss Lambert, our guest. The men tipped their hats respectfully, though Lucinda could see curiosity in their eyes. Beyond the immediate buildings, the ranch spread out in gentle hills dotted with grazing cattle. A creek wound through the property, providing water and creating lush areas of grass. This land reminds me a bit of where I grew up, Lucinda admitted as they stood on a small rise overlooking the valley. It has the same peaceful quality. Lucas looked pleased. Highest compliment you could give it. He hesitated, then added, You're welcome to stay as long as you need to figure out your next steps. Lucinda turned to him, studying his face in the clear morning light. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Thomas had been, but there was something compelling about his features, the strong jawline, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that spoke of a man who smiled often, the steadiness of his gaze. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked suddenly. You don't know me. I could be anyone. Lucas considered her question seriously. My mother always taught me that you judge a person's character by how they treat those who can do nothing for them in return. He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Besides, I know what it's like to be alone in the world. After the war, I had nobody. Wouldn't wish that feeling on anyone. His honesty touched her. Well, I'm grateful, whatever your reasons. The days passed quickly at Whispering Creek Ranch. Lucinda insisted on making herself useful, helping Martha with household chores, and gradually taking over more responsibilities as her strength returned. She enjoyed baking bread especially, finding satisfaction in the simple process of mixing, kneading, and shaping the dough. Lucas often found excuses to be in the kitchen when she was baking, claiming to need coffee or water but lingering to talk. They discovered shared interests in books and music, and Lucinda was surprised to learn that the tough cowboy played the fiddle quite well. "My father taught me," he explained one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Said every man should know how to make music to chase away the loneliness." "Would you play something?" Lucinda asked. "I'd love to hear it." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "Let me fetch it." He returned with a well-worn fiddle in a scuffed leather case. Settling back into his chair, he tuned the instrument with practiced fingers, then began to play a haunting melody that seemed to capture the beauty and melancholy of the plains around them. Lucinda watched his face as he played, noting how his usual guarded expression softened, his eyes half closing as he lost himself in the music. When the last note faded away, she realized she had been holding her breath. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "What's it called?" "Prairie Lament," he replied, lowering the fiddle. "Wrote it myself after my first winter out here. Gets lonely sometimes." "I can imagine," Lucinda said, though in truth, she couldn't recall feeling lonely since arriving at the ranch. Even when she was alone in her room, there was a sense of belonging that she hadn't expected to find again after Thomas died. As June turned to July, the weather grew hotter, but Lucinda hardly noticed. She had fallen into a comfortable routine at the ranch, her days filled with purposeful work and her evenings often spent in Lucas's company. They would sit on the porch, talking or sometimes just enjoying a companionable silence as the stars appeared overhead. One afternoon, Lucas found her in the garden, harvesting vegetables for supper. She looked up at his approach, shielding her eyes against the sun. "Need help?" he asked, crouching beside her. "I've almost finished," she replied, placing a tomato in her basket. "But you can carry this back to the house if you like." He took the basket, then seemed to hesitate. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something." Lucinda brushed the soil from her hands, suddenly nervous at his serious tone. "Yes. There's a social in town this Saturday. Dancing, food, that sort of thing. I thought you might like to go." He spoke quickly, as if afraid he might lose his nerve. "With me, I mean." Lucinda felt her cheeks warm, and not from the sun. In the weeks she'd been at the ranch, Lucas had been unfailingly kind and respectful, but he had never given any indication that he saw her as anything more than someone in need of help. "I'd like that very much," she said, surprised by how much she meant it. His face brightened with a smile that transformed his features. "Good. That's good." Saturday arrived clear and warm. Lucinda spent more time than usual preparing, washing her hair and styling it in a simple but elegant updo. Martha had altered one of Amanda's old dresses for her, a pretty green cotton with white lace trim that complemented Lucinda's fair complexion. When she descended the stairs, Lucas was waiting in the parlor, dressed in his best clothes, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest. He stared at her for a long moment before finding his voice. "You look beautiful, Lucinda." She blushed at the genuine admiration in his voice. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." Martha bustled in from the kitchen, beaming at them both. "Don't you two make a fine pair? Now off with you before it gets too late." Lucas had hitched his buggy rather than saddling horses, and he helped Lucinda up with gentle hands before climbing in beside her. The ride to town took about an hour, during which they talked easily about the ranch, the upcoming harvest, and the people they might see at the social. The town of Cedar Ridge was small but growing, with a main street lined with businesses, a general store, a bank, a hotel, and several saloons. The social was being held in the town square, where lanterns had been strung between trees, casting a warm glow over tables laden with food and an open area for dancing. Lucas seemed to know everyone, introducing Lucinda to a dizzying number of people. She noted with interest the speculative glances that passed between some of the townspeople, particularly the women, who eyed Lucas with new curiosity now that he had a companion. "Lucas O'Malley, bringing a lady to the social? Never thought I'd see the day," one older woman teased good-naturedly. Lucas took the ribbing with good humor, his hand resting lightly on Lucinda's back as he guided her through the crowd. The protective gesture wasn't lost on her, nor on those watching them. After filling plates with fried chicken, cornbread, and various salads, they found seats at a table with the local doctor and his wife, a friendly couple who seemed genuinely interested in Lucinda's story. "It's fortunate Lucas found you when he did," Dr. Ellis said, shaking his head. We've lost too many good people to the harshness of these plains. I thank God for it every day, Lucinda replied sincerely, glancing at Lucas, who looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. As they ate, a small band set up near the dance area, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica. Soon, lively music filled the air, and couples began to take to the floor. Lucas turned to Lucinda. Would you care to dance? She hesitated. I haven't danced since before Thomas died. We don't have to if you'd rather not, he said quickly. Lucinda studied his face, seeing the consideration there. Thomas had never been particularly sensitive to her feelings, always more focused on his own desires and plans. The contrast between the two men struck her forcefully. No, I'd like to, she decided. Very much. Lucas led her to the dance floor just as the band started a waltz. He placed one hand respectfully at her waist, taking her other hand in his. Lucinda rested her free hand on his shoulder, noting how solid it felt beneath her palm. I should warn you, I'm not the most graceful dancer, Lucas admitted as they began to move. You're doing fine, she assured him, and it was true. He moved with the same confident ease he showed on horseback, guiding her through the steps with gentle pressure at her waist. As they danced, Lucinda became increasingly aware of the man holding her. The clean scent of his soap, the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress, the way his eyes never left her face. She had been so focused on survival, then on gratitude, that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the attraction she felt toward him. The realization was both exhilarating and frightening. Thomas had been dead less than 3 months. Was it disloyal to feel this way about another man so soon? And even if it wasn't, what future could there be for her and Lucas? She was still essentially a homeless widow, dependent on his charity. The waltz ended, and Lucas led her back to their table. They spent the next few hours enjoying the festivities, dancing several more times, and talking with various townspeople. Throughout it all, Lucas stayed close to her side, attentive to her comfort, and clearly proud to have her as his companion. It was well after midnight when they finally started back to the ranch. The night had cooled considerably, and Lucas wrapped a blanket around Lucinda's shoulders against the chill. Did you enjoy yourself? He asked as the buggy rolled along the moonlit road. Very much, she replied truthfully. Everyone was so welcoming. They liked you, Lucas said. Mrs. Patterson already asked when you'll be joining the Ladies' Aid Society. Lucinda laughed softly. I got the impression she was more interested in whether I'd be staying in Cedar Ridge permanently. There was a moment of silence before Lucas spoke again, his voice careful. And what did you tell her? Lucinda looked at his profile, strong and steady in the moonlight. I said I hadn't decided my future plans yet. Lucas nodded, his eyes on the road ahead. That's fair. You've had a lot to adjust to. They fell silent again, but it was a weighted silence, full of unspoken questions. Lucinda found herself wishing he would ask her to stay, even as she wondered if such a wish was premature or unrealistic. When they reached the ranch, Lucas helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. They stood close together in the yard, the house dark except for a single lamp Martha had left burning in the kitchen window. Thank you for tonight, Lucinda said softly. It was wonderful to feel normal again. Lucas reached up to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and unexpected. You fit in here, Lucinda. Like you belong. Her heart quickened at his words and the gentle touch of his fingers. Do I? Yes, he said simply. Then, as if making a decision, he added, I don't want you to leave. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Lucinda searched his face, finding no trace of pity or obligation, there only a man laying his heart bare. I don't want to leave either, she whispered. Lucas drew a sharp breath, his hand moving to cup her cheek. I know it's too soon. After your husband, I mean. I don't expect anything. Just stay. Give yourself time to heal. Give us time to see what might grow between us, she finished when he trailed off. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. Yes, exactly that. Lucinda placed her hand over his where it rested against her face. I'd like that very much, Lucas. He smiled then, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his features and made her heart skip. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. It was brief, but perfect, a promise rather than a demand. When he drew back, Lucinda found herself smiling up at him, a strange sense of peace settling over her. "We should go in," he said reluctantly. "Martha will be wondering where we are." Hand in hand, they walked to the house, their steps light despite the late hour and the complexities that lay ahead. The summer passed in a golden haze of work and discovery. True to his word, Lucas never rushed Lucinda, content to let their relationship develop naturally. They spent every evening together, talking for hours about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Lucinda learned about Lucas's experiences in the war, the nightmares that still sometimes woke him, and his journey west in search of peace. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood, her brief marriage to Thomas, and her hopes for a future that now, increasingly, included Lucas. By August, their feelings for each other were obvious to everyone at the ranch. Martha watched their blossoming relationship with approval, often finding excuses to leave them alone together. The ranch hands exchanged knowing glances when their boss found reasons to stay close to the house rather than riding out to check the herd. One particularly beautiful evening in late summer, Lucas suggested they ride to his favorite spot on the ranch, a small hill overlooking the creek, where a lone oak tree provided shade. He packed a simple picnic, and they set out just as the worst heat of the day was beginning to fade. The spot was as lovely as Lucas had described, offering a panoramic view of the ranch and the rolling plains beyond. They spread a blanket beneath the oak and enjoyed cold chicken, fresh bread, baked by Lucinda that morning, and apple pie. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vivid colors, Lucas turned to Lucinda with an unusually serious expression. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began, taking her hand in his. "About what I want and what might make me happy." Lucinda's heart began to race. "And what have you concluded?" "That I never knew what happiness truly was until you came into my life." His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know you've been through tremendous loss, but I can't imagine my life without you now, Lucinda." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond. "This was my mother's," he explained, his voice slightly rough with emotion. "I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Lucinda felt tears welling in her eyes as Lucas continued. "I love you, Lucinda Lambert. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've made this ranch feel like a true home. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Lucinda couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She thought of that day on the plains, how close she had come to death, and how this man had not only saved her life, but given her a reason to live it fully. "Yes," she finally managed, the tears spilling over. "Yes, Lucas, I would be proud to be your wife." His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Lucas pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, the sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in deep purples and blues. The first stars were beginning to appear overhead. "Look," Lucas said, pointing upward. "A shooting star. Make a wish." Lucinda closed her eyes, but she couldn't think of anything to wish for. In that moment, she already had everything she could possibly want. They were married in October, when the trees around Cedar Ridge had turned gold and crimson. The ceremony was held at the ranch, with Martha bustling about ensuring everything was perfect, and the entire town turning out to celebrate. Lucinda wore a simple ivory dress that Martha and several ladies from town had helped her make, with late blooming wildflowers in her hair. Lucas waited for her beneath an arch of autumn branches, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit. When their eyes met as she walked toward him on the arm of Dr. Ellis, who had graciously offered to give her away, the love she saw in Lucas's gaze made her breath catch. The minister spoke of new beginnings, of two lives joining to create something stronger than either could be alone. Lucinda thought of how perfectly those words described her journey, how what had seemed like an ending on those desolate plains had actually been the beginning of the greatest happiness she had ever known. When they exchanged vows, Lucas's voice was clear and confident, while Lucinda's trembled slightly with emotion. The gold band he placed on her finger beside her engagement ring felt right, as if it belonged there. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and a cheer went up from the assembled guests as Lucas pulled Lucinda into a tender kiss. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and much toasting to the couple's happiness. Throughout it all, Lucas kept Lucinda close, his hand often finding hers as if reassuring himself that she was really his wife at last. When the last guests had departed, and they were finally alone in the house, now truly their home, Lucas took Lucinda's face between his hands and kissed her with reverent passion. "I still can't believe you're mine," he whispered against her lips. "I've been yours since the day you found me," she replied, her arms encircling his neck. "Since you brought me bread and promised I would feast with you." Lucas smiled at the memory. "And have you? Feasted, I mean." Lucinda thought of the months since that desperate day of safety found, of friendship blossoming into love, of a future once unimaginable, now stretching bright before her. "Every day," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him again. "And I always will." 2 years later, Lucinda stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Lucas approached from the corral, their 1-year-old daughter Ruth perched securely in his arms. The little girl was the image of her father, with the same blue eyes and determined chin, though she had Lucinda's brown hair. Lucas climbed the steps, leaning in to kiss Lucinda before transferring their squirming daughter to her arms. "She wanted to see the new foal," he explained, his face soft with love as he watched them. "Got quite indignant when I said it was time to come back to Mama." Lucinda laughed, pressing a kiss to Ruth's chubby cheek. "Did you see the pretty horse, sweetheart?" Ruth nodded enthusiastically. "Horse. Big. She's going to be riding before she can properly walk, the way she loves those animals," Lucinda said, shaking her head in mock dismay. "Like father, like daughter," Lucas replied proudly. He wrapped an arm around Lucinda's waist, drawing her and Ruth close against his side. "I got a letter from Amanda today. She and John are coming for a visit next month. They want to meet their niece." "That's wonderful news," Lucinda said warmly. She had exchanged letters with Lucas's sister, but had yet to meet her in person. "I'll have Martha help me prepare the guest room." They stood together on the porch, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the plains in gold and amber. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, expanding to include more land and cattle. The house, too, had grown, with new rooms added to accommodate their family and frequent guests. "Are you happy, Lucy?" Lucas asked softly, using the nickname he had given her shortly after their marriage. Lucinda looked up at him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." He bent to kiss her again, and Ruth giggled between them, reaching up to pat both their faces with her small hands. Lucinda closed her eyes, savoring the moment and the miracle of the life they had built together. From desperation on the desolate plains to this abundance of love and security, it was a journey she could scarcely believe, even now. Yet the evidence was all around her, in the thriving ranch, in the child in her arms, and most of all, in the steadfast heart of the man beside her. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "Always. And I love you," he replied, his voice a promise that would never be broken. "Until the end of our days." Together, the family of 3 turned to watch the sunset, silhouetted against the vast sky that had once seemed so threatening, but now embraced them like an old friend, a witness to their enduring love story that had begun with a simple act of kindness and the offer of bread to a starving woman.